Our afternoon session begins with Mrs. Ritu Jain. Glad to introduce. Mrs. Ritu Jain is a highly experienced professional in the field of medical device regulation. She possesses extensive knowledge of regulatory standards, including EU Medical Device Regulation, US FDA, Indian Medical Device Rule 2017, and ISO standards. With around 8.5 years of experience in academics, research, and the medical device industry, Mrs. Ritu has proven herself as a capable leader. She specializes in handling medical device complaints, managing the entire process from intake and investigation to decision making and report submissions, including EMRD and MIR processes. Mrs. Ritu holds an MTech degree in biomedical engineering and has published research articles and white papers in this field. She has held roles in renowned organizations such as L&T Technology Services, Siemens Healthineers, and HCL Technologies. Mrs. Ritu is a knowledgeable and dedicated professional with a strong track record in medical device regulation and quality assurance, making her an invaluable asset to any organization. We are glad to have you, ma'am. Kindly please take over.
Hi, yes, sure. Let me just share my screen.
Yes, ma'am.
So I hope my screen is visible and I'm
Yes,
audible.
ma'am, it is. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction and good afternoon to everyone. Hope everyone is doing well and you had your lunch, but not feeling sleepy. So this is an important session. So let's begin. So we'll be doing a deep dive into complaints handling, following with the vigilance and trend reporting for medical devices specifically, and which all falls under the umbrella of post-market surveillance. So let's start. So in general, as per the schedule of the conference, I can see most of the topic discussions were around Indian regulations and Indian adverse event reporting. So I will be just focusing more towards the international market, towards the US FDA regulations, towards the European regulation, and how it is revolving around the complaints handling, and what are the necessity that we have, that any manufacturer has to comply with for complaints handling, vigilance reporting, and trend reporting. So as per the definition of complaints, as per FDA 21 CFR Part 820.3, that is the regulation for US FDA, a complaint can be defined as the following: any written, electronic, or oral communication that alleges deficiency related to the identity, quality, durability, reliability, safety, effectiveness, or performance of a device after it is released for the distribution. So as I hope everyone is aware of that, the life cycle of a medical device, right? So when do we have this section of complaints? Where do we record that? So mostly after the device is placed in the market. After the device is placed in the market, how the device is doing in the market. So based on that, what complaints any manufacturer is receiving. So those complaints can be in any form. As per the definition, you can see any written, electronic, or oral communication. So for example, in general, these days, you can get written information, written complaints on many of the websites as well, on many of the apps that we use, right? Twitter is there, or any email that comes from any hospital or any user who is using that particular device from any particular company. Or even, for example, I'm a representative of some company and I go to some conference or I go to some social gathering. And if I observe someone is telling me about any product that my organization is working on, or my organization has released that product in the market, and if I get any information on that product, that the product is not doing good in the market, or they have experienced something about the product, so that is known as oral communication. So that also be considered as a complaint if it is a negative feedback for that particular device. So in general, this is the definition of complaint as per the FDA 21 CFR Part 820.3. Also, if you know the ISO standard 13485, which is a quality standard, which is the most important standard for any organization to comply with, is quality management medical device standard. According to them also, the definition is written, electronic or oral communication that alleges deficiency related to the identity, quality, durability, reliability, usability, safety or performance of the medical device that has been released from the organization's control or related to a services that affects the performance of such medical device. They have added just few terms there, which is usability, safety or performance of the medical device, which actually is a part of new MDR medical regulation, that usability is another factor which is very important for any medical devices. So moving further, giving examples of medical device complaints. Okay, so for example, there is a labeling error resulting in 3 cc syringe labeled as a 5 cc syringe. So in general, the requirement was 5 cc syringe. A requirement was 3 cc syringe, but there is a labeling error on the packaging itself, which says as 5 cc syringe. This will be considered as a medical device complaint. Another example is malfunctioning of electrical wheelchairs. So if there is any issue with the wheelchair, electrical wheelchair, and we get a complaint on the malfunctioning of it, that's considered as a complaint. Then mobility assistant.
Your voice is breaking in between.
It's not audible?
Yes, ma'am. Now it is fine.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so the mobility assistive equipment such as walkers and crutches break under the slightest of pressure. So this also will be considered as a medical device complaint. Another example is cardiopulmonary bypass devices breaking down, inadequately designed incubator. So anything, any malfunction happens with any of the medical device and which we receive as a complaint from any of the user is considered as a medical device complaint. And there are different phases in which it has to be processed. Another thing is there is a difference between complaints and feedback. As I told you before, that for example, if I'm going into a social gathering, right, and if I'm getting some oral communication with some different people and they're talking about some devices, so there could be a possibility that it could be just a feedback, not a complaint. So how do we differentiate between them? A complaint alleges that there are deficiencies concerning your product in the market. These deficiencies could be related to the effectiveness, quality, safety, or reliability of the product. This indicates that the complaints are negative. Management of a complaint is both a regulatory and business necessity, but on the other hand, feedback can either be positive or negative. So what does it mean? It means that not all the feedbacks are complaint. So mostly the feedback can be positive or negative both, right? So if we get a feedback which is negative, that has to be evaluated and then it is considered as a complaint. So not all the feedbacks are complaint. So just few examples of how we can differentiate between a feedback and a complaint. So first one is appreciation for a new product in the market when compared to similar existing product. So it's appreciation, right? So it's a positive feedback. So it's not a complaint. Errors in shipping your product from warehouse to the customer. So it's a shipping issue. It could or could not be a complaint. Then the cosmetic defects in the product. So cosmetic defects can be considered as a complaint. It requires further analysis. Then based on that, it can be considered as a complaint. Inquiries regarding the product information. This is just an inquiry regarding the information of the product. So this is a feedback. This is not a complaint. And examples of complaint we have already seen previously. Products not functioning according to the specification, which is meant to be product causing serious harm due to malfunctioning parts, product wrongly labeled. So these are some of the examples of how we can differentiate between a feedback and a complaint. So next is, what are the sources of medical device customers complaint? So as I told you previously, so there could be different sources from which you can get a complaint. It could be a walk-in customer, telephonic way, online forms by the company email ID, online product reviews on social media, and many more other things. through which a person can receive medical device complaints. So these complaints about the medical devices that are on the market can be grouped into two categories. The first one is incident-driven complaints. Second is the review-driven complaints. Now, what is the difference? So incident-driven complaints are basically a malfunctioning. As an example, if there is a malfunctioning with the electrical wheelchair that caused serious harm or death to the patient, or complaint from a hospital that your cardiopulmonary bypass device is malfunctioned during the critical surgery. So incident-driven complaint, by the name we can suggest, we can predict that. So something happened while the medical device is functioning. Okay. So malfunctioning happens while the wheelchair is in use. It has caused some serious harm and death to the patient. Or another example is cardiopulmonary bypass devices. Some malfunction happened during the critical surgery at that time. So those are known as incident-driven complaints. And such complaints will require urgent attention from the organization, because that could be harmful and that could delay the process of surgery as well, in case if it is a surgical device. So this is the example for incident-driven complaints. Next is the review-driven complaints. So review-driven complaints are based on the post-market surveillance data. So post-market surveillance data we will discuss in our upcoming slides. So in general, it's a review of data. So there is some data available already in the market. You might have heard of many research papers are there for some particular device, and they have identified like how many complaints were there previously for this particular device. And there is a data review that has been done for that particular product. So for example, while reviewing the performance records of a portable incubator, you noticed a recurring breakdown under specific situation. So this problem needs an investigation. This problem needs how it is related to the functioning of the device. So this is basically an example of a review-driven complaints. So it does not require immediate attention, but actually it adds up to the data that we have for a particular device, and it actually lead back to the trend reporting that we will discuss in the later slides. So this was about incident-driven and review-driven complaints. So next we have is what are customer complaints handling requirement. So every process, for example, if we talk about risk management, if we talk about design and control, if we talk about different segments of medical devices, so they always has to fulfill the requirements which are underlined by different regulations. So for example, here the regulatory requirements regarding the medical device customer complaint handlings as per US FDA 21, CFR Part 820, each manufacturer shall maintain complaints files. Each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures for receiving, reviewing, evaluating complaints by a formally designated unit. So what does that mean? As per US FDA, what they are asking the manufacturer, that there should always be a different complaint handling unit in their organization. So whenever they receive any complaints, so they should review it, receive it in a different pattern, review it, evaluate the complaints by that designated unit. So there should all the procedures, work instructions to be there as a part of complaint handling process. Similarly, for ISO 13485, in the clause 8, in the section 8.2, there is also a requirement saying the organization shall document procedures for timely complaints handling in accordance with applicable regulatory requirements. These procedures shall include at a minimum requirement and responsibility for the manufacturer and further on. So they are also asking for the same thing, that there should be the SOPs in place, the work instruction to be placed, which are timely compliant for the complaints handling. So this is for the 13485 requirement. Also, there are different requirements from US FDA in 21 CFR Part 803, which illustrate about the medical device reporting for devices, user facilities, manufacturer, importer, and distributor. So you might have learned that in the previous sessions that for Indian regulatory, right, we do have a medical device reporting system in place. So similarly for US FDA also, as per the requirement of the guidelines, there should be a requirement for a reporting, medical device reporting. And if you are a device user facilities, you must report the death, serious injury that a device has or may have caused or contributed, or have maintained the adverse event file, submitted, and summary annual report. So based on the classification of the device, there is a different timelines for submitting the annual reports, different type of report. It could be PSUR, it could be PMSR. So different reports has to be created for different type categories of the classification of the devices. So these are some of the requirements for the customer complaints handling. So as we are talking about more of complaints handling is required and what are the guidelines for it, but what exactly is the benefit of it? What exactly is the benefit even for the manufacturer for it or for the patient for it? So first is the regulatory compliance that we have just talked about for US FDA and ISO 13485. Second is maintaining a brand value. So when any company handles the complaints efficiently or a well-designed process is there in place, so the customer will always appreciate the feedback. The positive feedback that you receive will enhance the brand value for your company, and it will have a long-term relationship with such customers. Another benefit is monitoring the quality of the products. So, for example, if we get feedback on any of the product which is recently released and very new in the market, and we have not seen such device previously in the market. So, getting a feedback from the customer is actually adding a value that you are monitoring the quality of the product when the product is in the market. Okay, with the valuable inputs, you can have more development and you can develop more efficient products. Next is the reduction in the cost of labor. So once the process is established, once you get the valuable feedback inputs, so you can develop a safer and a better product, which will eventually reduce the labor cost going forward. It is a long-term process, but eventually that can happen. So these are some of the benefits of the well-designed complaint handling process in place. Okay. So now, as I told that there are different steps which are involved in handling a complaint. So first is customer complaint. As we discussed in the definition, the company may receive a complaint by oral, written or electronic means. So as an example, a hospital may send an email to you stating that some of the device that you have installed in the institution has started malfunctioning. So this is a complaint. So what happens is, so there are different software and tools which different manufacturers are used. Just giving one example is TrackWise that even I have used personally. So different software, what it does is, so there is a customer representative at the back end, and they will get this complaint by any of these means, right? Oral, written or electronic means. They will add an ID to that particular complaint and enter all the important information that they get from the customer regarding this complaint. For example, if there is any serious injury caused or what is the harm, what has happened, when is the date, expiry of the product, anything, all the relevant information that is required for the complaints to be processed further. The phase 2 that I said is a dedicated customer service representative department document the details and assign a complaint tracking number. So this is what I said is the ID. They will provide some ID, or we can explain it as complaint tracking number. So, and also the customer service representative, they will detail all the information which is required for the investigation later. For example, when the product was used, who was using it, who is the receiver at the end, what was the condition of the patient, and what was the batch number of the product or the code, whatever codes we have for the products. They can ask for details like batch number, model, year of manufacturer, and raise the complaint on that tracking number. So this is the phase 1 and phase 2. So next, phase 3 is for the medical review report, that is known as MDR submission. So this is a very important phase in which any manufacturer defines whether the complaint is a reportable event or a non-reportable event. We'll be discussing on reportable and non-reportable event in the further slides, but just to give an overview is, so there is a, as per US FDA, there is a guidelines to identify that which complaint is reportable and which is not reportable. And by reportable and not reportable, what do they mean? So reportable events will be considered more crucial. They will be focused more, and they have to be reported. They have to be submitted in the e-submitter for US FDA review. And the reports which are non-reportable, those also has to be reported, but in a less priority way. Okay. So there is a decision tree that we call. There are a couple of questions that has to be answered for each complaint. And at the end, when you answer the last question, you will get to know whether the complaint is reportable or not reportable. So adding from the previous example, so if anyone says that there is a complaint about malfunctioning of a cardiopulmonary bypass devices, so it is always reportable because the device itself is a high risk device. Okay, so this event is definitely reportable. So, and also, as I mentioned, that FDA regulation, they have lay out the requirement for the regulatory reporting for the reportable cases. Next phase that we have is the investigation phase. So in this phase, what happens is they need to determine the origin and the magnitude of the issue. Also, for example, taking the same example of cardiopulmonary bypass, whether it has happened only in a single medical center or they have received several complaints of that particular device from different medical facilities. Other than that investigation phase, they talk about the design, development, and all different phases, and they use all their risk management files to identify whether this complaint can be added into the trend reporting or this complaint can be used as a feedback to have a better product in the market, which ensures the patient safety. So after finishing third and fourth steps, which are the most crucial steps, we have the complaint closure. The complaint closure is done when the company has taken all the necessary action concerning the customer's complaint. We are now ready to close the complaint, determine the effectiveness of the remedies taken, and this becomes particularly true if you don't receive any similar complaint in the future. Okay, but if a manufacturer do receive a similar kind of complaints, so usually they stack it over and they usually connect it with the different IDs. For example, they map it to a different ID and they note similar type of complaints for all similar cases. So irrespective of the phase at which the complaint was closed, you need to document the parallel processes that you are taking, such as if the CAPA is necessary, corrective and preventive action is necessary, if the vigilance reporting is necessary, and also updating the risk management files. So this is what happens, what are the steps that they take for closing any complaints. So closure is not done just, they have to justify for each and every line item that what they have done, what is the action item that they are going to take, and how they are reporting it. So this is majorly about the complaints handling and the process of complaints handling and the tools that I mentioned previously, TrackWise, SmartSolve, and there could be different other tools which any of the manufacturing companies that they are using for complaints handling. These are some of the examples here. Okay, so this was all about complaints handling. Moving forward is what we have. What we have is the medical device reporting or vigilance reporting. So in general, as a healthcare professional, it always comes to your mind, right? Medical device causing adverse event. We have seen those things in drugs as well. But are there any adverse event reporting guidelines that we have discussed? for US FDA and how we are ensuring the patient safety using the regulations. And another difference is, another question that arises, why post-market surveillance is important. Why we are giving, see, for this session also, this whole session is about ensuring the patient safety. That comes back to post-market surveillance only, why it is so important and what exactly is the difference between surveillance and vigilance. So we'll be covering those in the upcoming slides, what is the difference and how we can understand it. So basically, post-market surveillance is a collection of processes and activities used to monitor the performance of a medical device. These activities are designed to generate information regarding use of the device or identifying device designs, usage problem, accurately characterizing the real-world device behavior and clinical outcomes. The need for post-market surveillance arises immediately upon when the device becomes commercialized. So surveillance in general that we say is an ongoing process of collection, collation, and analysis of data for public health purposes. And vigilance. In general, the post-market surveillance is divided as two parts, proactive and reactive. So reactive part of post-market surveillance is basically known as vigilance. That is to take care for and to stay awake. Active monitoring and investigation of adverse event and complaints. That is basically vigilance. Or responding after the event that we can say, which involves serious injury or in an extreme cases where a serious injury or death has occurred. So these activities can be considered as passive as they are largely data collection activities. Whereas on the other hand, as I said, post-market surveillance could be proactive also, which is meant to anticipate or curtail event before they occur. So proactive means that they are already taking some measures proactively. But how? There are many types of surveys, manufacturer-sponsored registries, clinical registry studies, post-market clinical follow-up studies. Using those, the proactive post-market surveillance activities can be done. And why these both things are required? Because patient safety is a serious global public health issue. To ensure the patient safety, all these aspects of post-market surveillance is required. So moving forward towards the vigilance. So all these definitions going forwards are taken up from EU MDR regulations. So the term vigilance means to report the incident report and field safety corrective action. We'll be discussing field safety corrective action in the upcoming slides. And what exactly is the incident? Incident is combination of serious incident. It could be serious incident and others. Serious incidents include death, life-threatening illness, permanent impairment of a body function, or permanent damage to a body structure. And in others, we have different hardware or software related issue from the devices. That could be malfunction or a display error messages and many others. Okay, so incident reporting. Incident reporting, basically what happens is the manufacturer will report the event to the competent authority. So here the competent authority, the word defines the European competent authority, but it can be for any competent authority, the regulatory body in general. So any serious incident involving device occurs, expected side effects which are clearly documented in the product information. If there is a what we call it in drugs is package insert. So in this we have the label in product information, IFU. So if those things are already documented in the IFU, which are expected side effects, so those are not required reporting, but anything that happens, an event has occurred, manufactured device is associated with an event, and the event led to or could have led to death, serious injury of patient, user, or any other person. those product has to be reported. That is the incident reporting. The same thing that we have discussed is the reportable event previously. Okay. And also, if there is some issues with the product which a manufacturer find out during getting the feedback or the complaints from a patient, they can address it by doing any field safety corrective action. So some of the examples of reportable event. A patient dies after the use of defibrillator and there is an indication of a problem with the defibrillator. So this incident is reportable incident. Another example is an infusion pump stops due to a malfunctioning of a pump but fails to give the appropriate alarm. There is no patient injury, but this should be reported as in a different situation. It could have caused a serious deterioration in the state of health. Okay, so this incident should be reported. So there are some of the examples of a non-reportable incident in general. A deficiency of a device found by the user prior to its use. So if in that case, it has not harmed anyone and it's already found, it can be filed as a complaint, but it is not a reportable incident. So there are two different things here. It can be filed as a complaint. You can let the manufacturer know that, see, this has happened. We have found a deficiency already, but it has not harmed anyone. Okay. So this can be filed as a complaint, but this is not a reportable incident. Means this will not go to a regulatory body as a complaint, as a reportable incident. Next is adverse event caused by a patient condition. So there is always this dilemma whether the adverse event is caused by a device or by a drug, or already the patient condition was not well. So it requires enough investigation to identify whether the adverse event is caused by a patient condition or by the device. So in that case, before making it as a reportable event, further investigation is required. Next is service life or shelf life of the medical device is exceeded. So if the shelf life or service life is already exceeded, but still the management or the hospital staff, they are using the product. So in that case, it is not a reportable incident. Then expected and foreseeable side effect that I already mentioned, if it is already expected as per the IFU or the instruction, the labeling, that this side effects will happen while using the product. So in that case, those incidents are considered as non-reportable incidents. And also, another is the abnormal use. So if the product is not used correctly by the healthcare professional, in that case, the product is not reportable. It can be considered as a filing a complaint, but again, when we go to the phase 3, identifying reportable and non-reportable, it can be considered as a non-reportable content, non-reportable incident based on how the product is abnormally used by the healthcare professional. So as I talked previously about the field safety corrective action, so what exactly it is? So it is an action taken by a manufacturer to reduce a risk of death or serious deterioration in the state of health associated with the use of medical device that is already placed in the market. So already some action is taken up by the manufacturer, and how do they notify the people, the general public? They will issue a field safety notice. So field safety notice is a communication to the customer or the user sent out by a manufacturer or its representative in relation to a field safety corrective action. So the field safety corrective action may include some following these things: is the return of the medical device to a supplier, medical device inspection, medical device modification, medical device exchange, and medical device destruction. So these things can be included in the corrective action. And just giving an example of field safety corrective action is a stent migrated were summarized in the quarterly report concerning the field safety corrective action. and the individual incidents did not have to be reported. So this is about the field safety corrective action, which is outlined in the MedDev 2.12 Revision 1, Volume 1 and Revision 8 guidelines for EU MDR. So next is, in general, why adverse event reporting is important. Whether it is reportable, whether it is not reportable, why adverse event reporting is important. So just giving one example is, if you see here, the healthcare professional is telling the person that the angioplasty surgery went well, but we have a reason to believe that the balloon may have moved. So if you see in this illustration, the balloon, which was the surgery, angioplasty surgery balloon, has been moved to his brain. Okay, but the healthcare professional is saying, so it is, the surgery went well. So it's always difficult to determine what exactly is the issue. So it is often difficult to determine whether the adverse event was caused by a medical device. So whenever you are in doubt, it is always better to report than not to report. That is why adverse event reporting is important. Next we have is the vigilance reporting and the regulatory requirements. So as we have talked previously about the complaints handling regulatory requirement, so this is the another one for the vigilance reporting. So as I mentioned previously also, another important standard, ISO 13485. So 13485 clause 7, which talks about product realization. It talks about the communication with customer regarding advisory notices. And what does it advisory notices means that we discussed just now is field safety notices. So this is a regulatory requirement for vigilance reporting. Another, in clause 8, they define on monitoring and measurement, which talks about documented procedure for issue of advisory notices, records required for complaints investigation. If CAPA is not required, document the rationale, compliance with national or regional regulations, and reporting to competent authority. So even if that we have discussed that for closing any complaint, right, we have to see whether the CAPA is performed there. So if in case some of the products CAPA is not required, even in that case, they have to provide a justification why CAPA is not required. Another thing we have discussed already, that for the regulatory requirement, 21 CFR Part 803 for US FDA, that talks about the procedure, work instruction to be in place. And also, as we are discussing, EU MDR and EU IVDR, in vitro diagnostic, talks about the vigilance reporting requirements. So this is as per the guidelines and the reporting requirements which are there for different countries. Okay. So next what we have is the medical device vigilance system. So in general, what does it say? If there is a communication between the manufacturer and competent authority regarding the reporting inadequacy of IFU labeling, which might lead to a harm, patient harm, or any issue, is known as medical device vigilance system. Similarly, if there is a communication between the user and the competent authority, the system is known as user reporting system. And again, the most important, if there is a communication between the manufacturer and the user, that process is known as the communication for the performance of the device inadequacy of anything, any malfunction or any recalls, those are done by the channel through post-marketing surveillance. So there are different things which are there in the adverse event reporting. I hope you already are aware of the MedWatch form, MIR form. MedWatch form is basically for US FDA. reporting of adverse event, MIR form is for EU. And you might have seen in the morning the Indian regulatory form as well, which is there for reporting the adverse event. So moving forward is why adverse event, when, where, and to whom we have to report. So there are different countries, they have different guidelines on the adverse event reporting timelines. So in the further slides, we will focus on the MDSAP countries. So MDSAP and European timelines. So MDSAP is Medical Device Single Audit Programs. It is a program that allows the conduct of a single regulatory audit of a medical device manufacturer quality management system that satisfies the requirement of multiple regulatory bodies. So these are the countries for MDSAP, which is USA, Canada, Australia, Brazil, and Japan. And we are covering Europe as a regulatory requirement here as well. So for USA, as I told, the form is called as MedWatch. And there is a form which is also the form known as 3500A. For Canada, we have a Health Canada regulatory, and there is a regulatory form for the adverse event reporting. Then for Europe, the regulation that we are already discussing, and the form is known as MIR, that is Manufacturer Incident Report. Then similarly for Australia, the regulatory body is TGA, and the form is Medical Device Incident Reporting Form. Similarly for Brazil, we have a regulatory body known as NVISA, and they also have their own regulatory forms. And for Japan, similarly, we have a separate regulatory body and separate adverse event reporting form. Now coming back to the timelines for adverse event reporting for these MDSAP countries, if you see for Australia, it has to be reported if it is a serious public health threat, 48 hours. If it is a death, 10 days. Then again, for the reoccurring, they have 30 days. Similarly for Brazil, they have, so if for Canada, they have 10 days and 30 days requirement. For Europe, they have 2 days, 10 days, and 15 days requirement from the manufacturer. And also they mentioned about the report. Annual report is required for different countries, and for which one it is not required. Similarly, if you see for USA, it is required to prevent the risk 5 days, and the death and the serious injuries. And for the any malfunction, it is 30 days. Okay. So this slide is just focusing mainly on the EU MDR vigilance reporting. So that is serious public health threat. The maximum time taken by the manufacturer to report is 2 days. For the death or any unanticipated serious deterioration, it is 10 days. And for other, it is 15 days. So it has been recently revised. Not recently, it has already been 2 to 3 years now. But initially it was 30 days. And now it has been considered as 15 days, which is quite less time for anyone to get all the information to report. That's why complaint handling process is very much required for all the manufacturers to have in place. Another thing is trend reporting. As I said, if we have a statistical data of not reportable cases also, that will consider into trend reporting. So any statistically significant increase in the frequency or severity of the incident that are not serious incident and expected undesirable side effect. So even if those incidents which were non-serious, but still we have a lot of frequency, we are receiving a lot of complaints regarding those. So that can also turn into a serious incidents later on. So to manage those and to track those, trend reporting has been added into the EU MDR and IVDR regulations, which are listed in the Article 88. So manufacturer shall report the trend to the competent authorities, and a report should be made where there has a significant increase in the rate of already reportable events adverse events that are currently exempt from reporting, and adverse event scheduled for periodic reporting. This was about the trend reporting. And responsibility for the stakeholders is the member states are responsible to ensure any information regarding the serious incidents or the field safety corrective information is informed. The competent authority responsibility is to evaluate the risk, taking into account the protection of public health and criteria such as causability, detectability, probability of reoccurrence, severity of harm, everything around the risk management things. And to monitor the manufacturer investigation of serious incident. Then what is the responsibility of manufacturer? It's everything that we have learned in our previous slides. That is to perform the investigation. When the serious incident is reported, that is to have a complaint handling process in place. Does not perform investigation which involves altering the device or sample of the batches. So there should be no manipulation in the data. Provide all the documents for risk assessment and final reports to the competent authority. So these are the responsibility of different stakeholders. So as per Article 90, which talks about the analysis of vigilance data, which is basically the competent authority shall perform the review of rare events, unexpected events, increase in the events, severity of the events, different patient population affected, and trends with the users. Also, the vigilance data also contains information and identifying the requirements for the corrective action, warning, design change, or any recall that has happened. So they have to provide the information of the recalls as well on their websites. The next thing that we have is the UIPS, that is the electronic system on the vigilance and post-market surveillance. That is basically an online portal in which all these information, they will have a UDI number, and they have to feed all this information regarding the post-market surveillance, which is required as per the classification of the device. So serious incidents and field safety corrective action, periodic summary report, trend reporting, PSURs, field safety notices, information to be exchanged between the competent authorities and the member state manufacturer commission. And it will also include the universal link, that is the UDI system link. So that is majorly mostly all the things about the post-market surveillance and complaints handling, vigilance reporting system for European regulations, for US regulations. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any questions here?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We have one question from Vishal. How can patient feedback be actively solicited and integrated into the complaints handling process, and what impact does this have on patient satisfaction and device safety?
Okay, so for the patient feedback, okay, so for the one thing that we discussed, right, patient feedback, the feedback is different. So feedback can not always considered as a complaint. So if it is a positive feedback, that it will be, appreciation or something like a device is doing very nice, or it's doing the intended job, right? That is a different thing. But if it is a negative feedback, it will go to all the processes, different phases of complaints handling. And the impact that you're asking, that what impact does this have on the patient satisfaction and device safety? So as I discussed in the later slides, so if there is any issue, major issue with the product that the manufacturer finds out, they will have to provide the field safety corrective action and field safety notices on their website. They might be able to recall also the device. Those are the actions which are taken for the patient satisfaction and device safety.
Thank you, ma'am. Someone is asking, how should organizations communicate with various stakeholders, including healthcare professionals, regulatory agencies, and patients regarding complaints and their resolutions?
So how should organization communicate with various stakeholders? So various stakeholders, as I told you about the member state and the competent authorities and the manufacturer. So these are the various stakeholders, and they interact within each other, as I told you, the systems, right? User reporting system, post-market surveillance system. And based on that, they provide the resolution. So if there is anything, they have meetings with the authorities and they discuss on the what should be the outcome, and they do receive the notices from the different regulatory authorities based on the product.
Thank you, ma'am. Ankita Sharma is asking, how do complaints inform risk management activities, and how can organizations use complaints data to assess and mitigate risk associated with their devices?
Okay. Yeah, so this is a very good question. So how do complaints inform risk management activities, and how can the organization uses complaints data? So the data that is, fed in, which is in the phase 1 and phase 2, that data basically tells about different phases of a product life cycle, right? In which life cycle, for example, design and development life cycle, in that also we have different stages. So in which if, whether it is an issue of the design, whether it is an issue of the during the manufacturing process, or whether it is an issue of application. So these are the three different things that in the risk files we mitigate. Okay, so if it is a design related issue, it will help in that phase of the life cycle of the product to mitigate that risk. So it all boils down to the risk management. So in risk management, we have different categories of field safety, this FMEAs that we call about, which is for design, application, as well as the process. So in whichever category the complaint is talking about, so that life cycle, that part of that life cycle of the device will be affected. And based on that, the risk is calculated, the occurrence, the harm, everything is calculated based on 14971, and the solution is provided, and it acts as a feedback for that particular product. Yeah, so that's how it's done.
Thank you, ma'am. Someone is asking, what initiatives or standards are in place to harmonize global medical device adverse event reporting and tools, and how do reporting tools support companies in navigating international reporting requirements?
Okay. So as per the standards, I told you this ISO 13485 standards, 14971, 14971, and then every country has their different standard. Plus, we do have this GHTF, that is the Global Harmonized Task Force. So these are the different, initiative and the standards which are in place. And these tools support the company to navigate. So there is I told you different tools are there for different companies. But even if you want to see the data, for example, for Europe, for US regulation, so if you go to their websites, you can actually see the data there in it's MAUDE data, MAUDE, that's as a MAUDE website, and there you can find all the all the data from complaints handling there, and you can see what are the resolution that they have provided for that, for each particular complaint.
Thank you, ma'am. Last question, Rashmi Adhikari is asking, how is technology such as artificial intelligence and big data analytics being leveraged to enhance the efficacy and effectiveness of complaints handling?
Yeah. So this is another good question that we have, is how the artificial intelligence is, taking, and because it is all a data analyst, it is all a data analysis that we do in complaints handling. But the problem is each complaint is different, each user is different, each healthcare professional, how they have used the product is different. So it is still a bit challenging to say that, this artificial intelligence or big data analyst can do more majorly everything that we do. So majorly the investigation part and the reportability part is still handled by in a normal way by not using the artificial intelligence, because each complaint is different, right? So it's very difficult to add programming there. So there.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really a engaging session. Thank you so much for your informative session on complaint handling. Your insights into this critical aspect of medical device safety are greatly appreciated, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, guys, let's move towards our next session, overview on